Du-Han Kim stared at his computer screen until his eyes hurt. The office around him was quiet. Most people had gone home hours ago, but he couldn't stop looking at the pattern that kept showing up in his research. For 10 years, he had studied old Korean stories about visitors from the stars. Most people thought these were just fun tales to tell children. But Du-Han had found something strange. The same story appeared in many places, told by people who had never met each other. The light from his desk lamp fell on the stack of papers beside him. Each one told about lights in the sky that formed a special shape, like an arrow pointing down at Earth. He had found this story in books from 1,000 years ago, and in tales from small villages today. His phone buzzed, making him jump. It was Jin-Ah Park, his research partner. "Du-Han, you need to see this right now," she said. Her voice shook with excitement. "What is it?" he asked, rubbing his tired eyes. "Remember those radio signals I told you about? The strange ones from space. I found something in them. They make the same pattern as your stories." Du-Han sat up straight. "You're sure? Come to my lab. I'll show you." 20 minutes later, Du-Han stood in Jin-Ah's lab, looking at her computer screen. She had mapped out the signals from space. When she drew lines between them, they formed the same arrow shape from the old stories. "This can't be just luck," Jin-Ah said. She pushed her coffee cup away to make room for more papers. "Look at this. The same pattern shows up in old Chinese stories, Japanese myths, and even European fairy tales." Du-Han picked up one of the papers. It was a children's drawing from a small town in Korea. A child had drawn the lights in the sky, making the same arrow shape. The drawing was from last week. "We need to tell someone about this," Du-Han said. "I tried," Jin-Ah said. She sounded tired. "I sent our findings to Professor Lee at the astronomy department. He said it was interesting, but probably just a coincidence." Du-Han shook his head. "This is more than coincidence. Look at the dates." He spread out his research papers. "Every 300 years, the stories get more frequent. More people see the lights. More children draw the arrow. And Jin-Ah." He looked at her. "It's been exactly 300 years since the last time." Jin-Ah's face went pale. She checked her computer again. "The signals are getting stronger too. Whatever's making them is getting closer." They worked through the night, gathering more proof. They found more stories, more patterns. In Mongolia, they found cave paintings showing the same arrow. In Japan, there were old scrolls warning about lights in the sky. All of them said the same thing. When the arrow appears, something big will happen. As the sun came up, Du-Han made a decision. "We need to warn people," he said. "These stories weren't just made up. They were warnings, passed down through generations. Something is coming." Jin-Ah nodded slowly. "But who will believe us? We're just folklore researchers. Even with the radio signals, they'll say we're seeing things that aren't there." Du-Han looked at the child's drawing again. The arrow in the sky, drawn in crayon, seemed to point right at him. "Then we'll find proof they can't ignore. All these stories, all these warnings, they were left for a reason. Our ancestors were trying to tell us something important." He picked up his phone and started typing a message to the university board. As he wrote, Jin-Ah's computer beeped. New signals were coming in, stronger than before. The arrow in the sky was getting clearer. And whatever it was pointing to, whatever was coming, it was getting closer. They didn't know it yet, but in other places around the world, other researchers were seeing the same thing. The warnings left by their ancestors were about to make sense, and humanity would need every bit of that ancient wisdom to face what was coming. 3 weeks after Du-Han and Jin-Ah's discovery, the world changed. It started with a news report that broke into every TV channel around the globe. "We interrupt this program with breaking news," the reporter said, her voice shaking slightly. "Multiple objects have appeared in Earth's orbit. Space agencies worldwide confirm these are not satellites or known space debris." Du-Han nearly dropped his coffee mug when he saw the images. The objects in space formed the exact arrow pattern from the ancient stories. His phone rang immediately. It was Jinnah. "Are you seeing this?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "It's exactly like the warnings. We need to." A knock at his office door cut him off. When he opened it, he found himself facing a woman in a military uniform. Her name tag read Captain Sun-Mi Lee. "Dr. Kim," she said, "please come with me. Your research partner, Dr. Park, is already on her way to our facility." The ride to the military base was quiet. Captain Lee didn't say much, but Duhan noticed how she kept checking her tablet, which showed live feeds of the objects in orbit. They arrived at an underground building. Inside, Duhan found Jinnah working with a team of scientists. Large screens covered the walls, all showing the same thing: the arrow formation in space. "Dr. Kim," Captain Lee said, 3 hours ago, these objects appeared exactly where your research predicted they would. The government wants to know everything you know about them." Before Duhan could answer, all the screens in the room flickered. A face appeared, or something like a face. It was smooth and pale, with large, dark eyes that didn't blink. "People of Earth," it said in perfect Korean, though Duhan would later learn that everyone heard it in their own language. "We are the Guardians. We come in peace." The being went on to explain that they were an ancient race that watched over developing civilizations. They said they had come to help Earth join a greater community of worlds. But something felt wrong to Duhan. The words were friendly, but they matched too perfectly with some of the darker warnings in the old stories. "Captain," he said quietly to Sun-Mi, "in every story we found, the visitors called themselves protectors or guardians. And in every story, that was a lie." Sun-Mi looked at him sharply. "What happened in those stories?" "The details are different, but the pattern is the same. They come offering help. People celebrate. Then people start to disappear." Jinnah joined them, carrying an old book. "Look at this," she said, opening to a marked page. "This story from 300 years ago." The visitors said the exact same words, word for word. Sun-Mi's face grew serious. While the world's leaders prepared to welcome the Guardians, she made a decision. "Tell me everything," she said. "Every story, every warning, every detail that might help us understand what we're really dealing with." For the next few hours, they worked together. Duhan and Jinnah shared their research, while Sun-Mi made calls to other military leaders who might listen. Outside their secure room, the world celebrated. News channels showed people dancing in the streets, welcoming humanity's new friends from the stars. But in that quiet underground room, 3 people studied ancient warnings and prepared for what they feared was coming. The Guardians had appeared exactly as the stories said they would. Now they had to figure out what the stories said would happen next. "There's one thing I don't understand," Sun-Mi said, looking at their research. "If these beings are so dangerous, why didn't they take over Earth in the past? What stopped them?" Duhan looked at the ancient texts spread out before them. "That's what we need to find out," he said, "because whatever worked then, we might need it to work again." Above them, the arrow formation in the sky grew brighter, casting strange shadows over a celebrating world that didn't yet know it needed saving. Jinnah couldn't sleep. It was 3 a.m., and she sat in the military base's research room, looking through old files. While the Guardians talked about peace on TV, she searched for answers in humanity's past. Then she found something that made her heart stop. "Duhan, Captain Lee," she called out to her colleagues, who were sleeping on cots nearby. "Wake up. Look at this." They rushed to her desk, still groggy. On her screen was a cave painting from Thailand, over 10,000 years old. It showed the same beings as the Guardians, but they weren't helping people. They were taking them away. "There's more," Jinnah said, opening more files. "Much more." She showed them pictures from different places and times. Ancient pottery from Korea showing people fighting tall, pale creatures. A Viking stone carving of the same arrow formation in the sky. cave art from Australia depicting people hiding from beings with dark eyes. They'd been here before, Du-Han said quietly. Many times. Sun Mi pointed to another image. What's that symbol? It keeps appearing in all of these pictures. Du-Han looked closely. In each image, there was a small mark that looked like a spiral with 3 lines through it. I've seen this before, he said. It's in those temples we couldn't enter. The ones the local people said were sacred. Sun Mi made some calls. An hour later, they were in a helicopter, flying to an old temple in the mountains. The village elder who guarded it had agreed to let them in after Sun Mi explained the situation. The temple was small and dark. The elder led them to a back room that hadn't been opened in generations. On the walls were paintings that made them all stop and stare. The paintings told a story. The guardians had come before, saying they wanted to help, but they really wanted to take people away, to use them somehow. The paintings showed how humans had fought back and won. Look at the dates, Jinnah said, shining her flashlight on some old writing. This happened every 300 years, just like now. But how did they win? Sun Mi asked. These people had no modern weapons, but they drove the guardians away. Du-Han studied the walls carefully. There, he said, pointing to a series of symbols. These aren't decorations. They're instructions. He took out his notebook and started copying the symbols. Every culture that fought them used the same methods. That's why the stories are so similar. They're not just stories. They're teaching future generations how to fight. Jinnah's phone beeped. She looked at it and went pale. The Guardians just announced they're going to start their elevation program tomorrow. They say they'll take volunteers first. Just like in the stories, Du-Han said. They always start with volunteers. But then they take everyone. Sun Mi finished. She looked at the paintings again, at the scenes of ancient battles and victory. How long will it take you to decode these instructions? A few hours, Du-Han said. But we'll need help to understand them fully. Some of these look like they're talking about energy fields or something similar. I know someone, Sun Mi said. A scientist named Yumho Kang. He studies quantum physics, but he also knows a lot about old traditions. He might be able to help us understand how our ancestors fought these beings. They took pictures of everything in the temple. As they left, the village elder stopped them. He pulled out an old box and gave it to them. Our family has guarded this for generations, he said. We were told to give it to the people who came asking the right questions when the Sky Arrow returned. Inside the box was a small device made of crystal and metal. It looked both ancient and somehow advanced. Now we know why they never fully conquered Earth, Du-Han said, holding the device carefully. We've been preparing for this fight for thousands of years. Above them, the Guardian ships glowed in the night sky, waiting to start their elevation program. But this time, humanity wasn't as helpless as they thought. Yumho Kang looked at the crystal device through his special glasses. The quantum physicist had been working in his private lab for 6 hours straight, trying to understand how the ancient tool worked. This is amazing, he said, looking up at Du-Han, Jinnah, and Sun Mi. Our ancestors were much smarter than we thought. This isn't just a simple tool. It's a quantum field generator. Can you explain that in simple words? Sun Mi asked, checking her phone for updates on the Guardians' activities. It makes a special kind of energy field, Yumho said. The same kind of energy that human brains make, but much stronger. And look. He pointed to his computer screen, which showed the Guardian ships. Their ships make the opposite kind of energy. While world leaders prepared for the first group of volunteers to join the Guardians' elevation program, the team worked in secret. They had set up their base in an old bunker that Sun Mi's unit used for emergencies. The ancient instructions are starting to make sense, Du-Han said, spreading out his notes. They're not just random ceremonies. Each one creates a specific type of energy field. Our ancestors figured out how to use their own brain waves as weapons. Jinnah was working at her computer, connecting with other researchers who had found similar evidence around the world. "I'm finding more people who don't trust the Guardians," she said. "Scientists, military leaders, historians, they're all seeing the same patterns we are." Sun Mi looked at the map on the wall. Red dots showed where the Guardians had set up their welcome centers for volunteers. "They're building these centers in the same places they used in the past," she said. "Exactly the same spots. Because those spots have special energy properties," Young Ho explained. He held up the crystal device. "That's why our ancestors built temples there later, to block those points." They worked through the day, preparing for what was coming. Young Ho built more devices based on the ancient one. Du-Han and Jinnah taught others how to use the old defense techniques. Sun Mi gathered more military allies who believed their evidence. Then they got the news they were dreading. The first group of volunteers had gone missing after entering a welcome center. "It's starting," Du-Han said, his face grim. "Just like in the stories. First a few disappear, then more, then they start taking everyone." "We're not ready," Jinnah said, worried. "We need more time to prepare." But Young Ho smiled for the first time that day. "Actually, we are ready. Look at this." He turned on one of the devices he had built. The air hummed softly. On his computer screen, they could see the energy readings from a nearby welcome center dropping. "The ancient device works," he said. "And now we can make more. Lots more." Sun Mi immediately started making calls. "How many can you build?" she asked Young Ho. "With help? Hundreds. Maybe thousands. And each one protects how many people?" "About a square mile," Young Ho said. "More if people inside that area learn to focus their thoughts the right way." Du-Han pulled out the old instructions. "That's what these meditation techniques are for," he said. "They're not just ceremonies. They're training for people to boost the field's power." Jinnah got an alert on her computer. "The Guardians just announced they're starting Phase 2 tomorrow. They'll begin elevating whole neighborhoods at once." Sun Mi stood up, her face determined. "Then we start tonight. Du-Han, teach as many people as you can those meditation techniques. Young Ho, get your science team building those devices. Jinnah, spread the word to every group you've contacted." She looked at each of them. "The Guardians think humans are primitive and weak. They think we forgot how to fight them. Time to show them how wrong they are." As night fell, they began their work. All around the world, small groups of people gathered in secret, learning to use humanity's oldest weapons, their minds, their unity, and their will to stay free. The Guardians made their big announcement on every TV channel and phone screen in the world. Their smooth, pale faces smiled as they shared their exciting news. "Dear friends on Earth," they said, "tomorrow we begin the mass elevation program. Entire cities will be lifted to a higher state of being. This is our gift to humanity." Du-Han watched the announcement from their bunker base, his hands turning into fists. "That's exactly what the ancient texts warned about," he said, word for word. Beside him, Young Ho's computer started beeping wildly. "Look at these readings," he said, pointing to his screen. "When they made that announcement, their ships released some kind of energy wave. It's making people feel happy and excited about their plan." Jinnah rushed in with her laptop. "We're getting reports from all over. People who were suspicious of the Guardians yesterday are now eager to join the elevation program. It's like they've forgotten all their doubts." "Not everyone," Sun Mi said, walking in with a group of military officers from different countries. "Some of us can still think clearly." "Why?" Young Ho checked his readings again. "The ancient device we found. It's protecting this whole base from their energy waves. And look at this." He pointed to a map showing places where people were still resisting the Guardians' influence. "Every single resistance spot is near an old temple or sacred place. Our ancestors built those places as shields," Du-Han said, understanding now. They knew the Guardians would return. Jinnah pulled up some security camera footage from a welcome center. What they saw made them all go quiet. People walked in smiling, but they never walked out. Instead, strange lights flashed, and empty clothes fell to the floor. "They're not elevating people," Sunmai said grimly. "They're harvesting them, just like in the old stories." Young Ho studied the footage carefully. "They're turning people into pure energy," he said. "That's why they call it elevation. They literally break down our bodies into energy they can use." "But why didn't they take everyone in the past?" one of the military officers asked. "Why did they fail before?" Duhan opened his research files. "Because humans have something special," he said. "Look at these brain scan comparisons. Normal human brain waves naturally disrupt their technology. That's why they need to use those energy waves to make us accept them first. And that's why the meditation techniques work," Jin-Ah added. "They make our natural resistance stronger." Suddenly, all their phones buzzed at once. The Guardians were announcing the list of cities that would be elevated first. Millions of people cheered, completely under their control. "We need to move fast," Sunmai said. She turned to the military officers. "Get those devices to every city on their list. Duhan, send out the meditation instructions to everyone who's still thinking clearly." Young Ho looked worried. "Even with the devices and the meditation, we can only protect maybe 20% of the people in each city." "That's enough," Duhan said. "The ancient stories say we only need to protect some people. When the Guardians try to harvest a city and find out they can't take everyone, their whole process fails." Jinnah was already sending messages to their global network of helpers. "I'm telling everyone to gather as many people as they can in the protected zones. We can't save everyone, but we can save enough to stop them." They worked through the night, racing against time. The devices were moved to key positions in cities around the world. People who could still think clearly guided others into protected areas. The old meditation techniques spread from person to person. Above them, the Guardian ships moved into position, preparing for their harvest. But this time, humanity wasn't as helpless as they appeared. In hidden places all around the world, people were remembering their true strength, preparing to fight back against the false gods who wanted to steal their essence. The next day would show whether humanity's ancient defenses would work again. Everything depended on what happened when the Guardians tried to elevate their first city. The first attack came at dawn. The Guardian ships glowed bright blue over Seoul, ready to begin their harvest. But something went wrong with their plan. "It's working," Young Ho shouted, watching his screens in the bunker. The ancient devices they had placed around the city were creating shields of golden energy. Inside these protected zones, people were waking up from the Guardians' control. Duhan watched through binoculars from their hidden base. "Look at the ships," he said. "They're using more power than they plan to use." The Guardian ships pulsed with bright light, trying to break through the shields. In the parts of the city they could reach, empty clothes fell to the ground as people were turned into energy. But in the protected areas, nothing happened. "They can't get through," Sunmai said, speaking into her radio to teams around the world. "The ancient defenses are holding. Start Phase 2. Jinnah pressed a button on her computer, sending out a message they had prepared. All over the city, screens lit up with proof of what the Guardians really were. Pictures from ancient times showed their true nature. Videos from the welcome centers showed what really happened to the volunteers. The Guardians tried to block the message, but they couldn't. The truth spread quickly. People in the protected zone started using the meditation techniques they had learned. Just as the ancient stories said, their focused thoughts made the shields stronger. "More cities are reporting the same thing," Jinnah called out, reading messages from around the world. "The Guardians can't break through the shields, and people are starting to fight back." The ships over Seoul changed color, turning angry red. The Guardians' faces appeared on screens again, but they weren't smiling now. "This resistance is pointless," they said. "We have harvested 1,000,000 worlds. You cannot stop us." But Young Ho laughed. "Look at their energy readings," he said. "They're getting weaker. Our resistance is hurting them more than they expected." Sun Mei got reports from her military teams. In cities around the world, the same thing was happening. The Guardians could only harvest some people, not whole cities like they planned. And every person who resisted made them weaker. They lied about the million worlds too, Duhan said, checking his ancient texts. The stories say they tried to harvest many worlds, but they failed most times. That's why they keep coming back to Earth. We're one of the few planets that has what they need. The battle went on all day. The Guardians tried different ways to break through the shields, but nothing worked. More and more people woke up from their control. The protected zones grew larger as people learned to strengthen them. Then something amazing happened. The people inside the shields found they could push back against the Guardians' power. When they all focused together, they could actually hurt the ships. That's what the ancient meditation techniques were really for, Yum-Ho said excitedly. They don't just protect us, they teach us how to fight back. Jinnah got more messages from their global network. It's happening everywhere, she said. People are pushing back. Some of the Guardian ships are actually retreating. Sun Mai watched through her binoculars as one of the ships over Seoul started to pull away. Its red glow was fading, getting weaker. Send the word to everyone, she ordered. Focus on one ship at a time. Push together. Around the world, people united their minds against the invaders. The ancient techniques, passed down through stories and temples, taught them how to combine their natural resistance into a powerful weapon. The Guardians had come to harvest humanity. Instead, they found themselves facing an enemy that remembered how to fight them, an enemy that had been preparing for their return for 300 years. The first day of resistance was ending, but the real battle was just beginning. Young-Ho burst into the command room early in the morning, his eyes wide with excitement. I know why we're special, he said, waving a stack of papers. I finally understand what makes humans different. Duhan, Jinnah, and Sunmei gathered around him as he spread his research on the table. After 3 days of fighting the Guardians, they needed good news. Look at these brain scans, Young-Ho said, pointing to his papers. Normal human brain waves aren't just random. They're perfectly opposed to Guardian technology. We're like natural jammers for their energy fields. Jinnah studied the scans. Is that why they can't just take everyone at once? Because our brains fight back without us even knowing. Exactly, Yum-Ho said. And there's more. The meditation techniques in the ancient texts. They're not just random exercises. They're instructions for tuning our brain waves to the strongest defensive pattern. Sunmei looked at the latest battle reports on her tablet. That explains why the protected zones keep getting stronger. More people are learning to focus their thoughts the right way. But Duhan was reading something else in the old texts. Wait, he said. If that's true, then these instructions for a global meditation ritual, they're not just ceremony. They're a weapon. He showed them a series of drawings from different cultures. Each one showed large groups of people meditating together, creating waves of energy that pushed away invading ships. Our ancestors left us a plan for driving them away completely, Duhan said. Not just fighting them off, but making them leave Earth forever. Young-Ho checked some calculations on his computer. He's right. If enough people meditated the right way at the same time, the combined brain waves would create a field too powerful for the Guardians to stay near Earth. How many people would we need? Sunmei asked. About 1 million, Young-Ho said, all focusing their thoughts the same way at the same time. Jinnah was already typing on her computer. We have more than that in our protected zones now. And more people are waking up from their Guardians' control every hour. They worked quickly to spread the plan. Jinnah sent messages to their global network. Duhan translated the meditation instructions into simple steps everyone could follow. Young-Ho used his devices to measure and adjust the energy patterns. Sunmei organized the timing. We'll do it when the most people are awake across all time zones, she said. That's in 6 hours. As they waited, they watched the ongoing battles. The Guardians were getting desperate. They had lost half their ships already, driven away by humanity's growing resistance. But they were fighting harder with the ships they had left. "They know what we're planning," Duhan said, watching the ship's erratic movements. "The old stories say they felt it last time too, just before humans drove them away." When the time came, Jinnah sent out the signal. In protected zones around the world, people sat down together. They remembered the simple steps they had learned. Parents taught children. Friends helped friends. Everyone who was free from the Guardian's control joined in. Young Ho watched his energy readings climb higher and higher. "It's working," he whispered. "The field is building up." Duhan led the meditation in their bunker, speaking the same words that humans had used against the Guardians for thousands of years. Sun Mei coordinated with other military leaders, making sure everyone stayed safe during the attempt. As millions of people focused their thoughts together, something amazing happened. The golden shield energy from their protected zones began to spread. It moved like waves across cities, countries, and oceans. The Guardian ships started to shake. Their red, angry glow flickered and faded. The waves of human thought were pushing them back, just as the ancient stories had promised. Humanity had found its greatest weapon, not in guns or bombs or spaceships, but in the power that had protected them all along, the unique pattern of their minds working together. The golden wave of human consciousness spread across Earth like a sunrise. Every person who joined the meditation made it stronger. The Guardian ships tried to fight back, but they couldn't stop it. "Look," Jinnah pointed at her screens. The ships were being pushed away from Earth, forced back by the power of millions of human minds working together. Young Ho checked his readings. "Their energy is completely disrupted. They can't maintain their form in our space anymore." One by one, the Guardian ships began to fade. Some tried to escape, while others simply disappeared. Their pale, smooth faces appeared one last time on screens around the world. "This is impossible," they said. "You are primitive beings. How can you have this power?" Duhan spoke to them from the bunker, his voice broadcast worldwide. "We're not primitive. We're the descendants of those who fought you before. We're the children of those who won." The last Guardian ship vanished from Earth's orbit. The golden wave settled like a protective blanket around the planet. In cities everywhere, people began to wake up from the Guardian's control. Sun Mei got reports from her teams around the world. "The harvest centers are empty," she said. "And look, the people they took, they're coming back." In every harvest center, bright lights flashed. People appeared, confused but alive. The Guardian's technology had failed completely, releasing everyone they had taken. "The ancient texts were right," Duhan said, reading from his notes. "When their power fails, they can't hold what they stole. Everything returns to its natural state." Jinnah worked at her computer, collecting data from their global network. "We're getting similar reports from everywhere. Every single person they took is back. No one was lost." Young Ho studied the energy readings from the battle. "We need to understand what happened," he said. "This power we have, it's not just for fighting aliens. It could help us in other ways too." Teams of scientists began studying the ancient devices and meditation techniques. They discovered that the old temples weren't just hiding places. They were research centers built by ancient humans who studied consciousness. Our ancestors weren't afraid of the Guardians, Duhan realized. They were learning from them. Every time the Guardians attacked, humans got stronger. Sun Mei organized teams to protect the knowledge they had gained. "We need to be ready," she said, "not just for them, but for anything else that might come from space." Around the world, people began to look at their old stories differently. Tales that seemed like simple myths now held important truths. The line between science and tradition started to blur as researchers studied the power of human consciousness. Jinnah created a new database, combining the ancient warnings with modern science. "Next time," she said, "we won't have to rediscover everything. We'll be ready from the start." Duhan looked at the night sky, now empty of threat. The Guardians thought they were superior because they had advanced technology, he said. But they didn't understand that technology isn't everything. The power of minds working together, that's the strongest force there is. Young Ho's devices still hummed softly, monitoring Earth's new protective field. The best part is, he said, we're just beginning to understand what we can do. The Guardians taught us something important about ourselves. The world had changed. Humanity had faced its greatest threat and won. Not with weapons or violence, but with the unique power they had carried within themselves all along. In the end, the urban legends had turned out to be true. But the reality was even more amazing than the stories. Humans weren't helpless victims waiting to be saved. They were the guardians their world had needed all along.